Up to this point in this series, I've done a lot of warm and fuzzy stories of Jesus and his encounters, and rightfully so. That's what they're like. This one, the one we did last week, what we're going to do today, has that warm and fuzzy element to it. But, you cannot not read the Gospels of Jesus and at times not be confounded by him and exacerbated by him and sometimes even infuriated with him. I don't know about you, but there are times in my walk that I'm infuriated with God. I don't know if you've ever been there. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but I just said it. Especially when he does not answer you in something important that you're talking to him about, and he delays. That's when I'm most likely to maybe get a little infuriated, just a little, right? So we're going to come back to the story we started last week, and we looked at it last week from the perspective of the woman. I want to look at it this week from the perspective of Jairus, because he had a very infuriating experience with Jesus. And we're going to be back in the Gospel of Mark. So we're back in Mark chapter 5 where we were last week. If you would turn there with me. And as you're turning again, the whole reason for this series is I am wanting for me and for all of us that gap between my God concept and especially my gut image of him, that it would get closer and closer to the reality of who he is. And our prayer all summer is that prayer that, Father, I want to know you as you truly are, not how I think of you. And the only way this can happen is being daily in his word. And that's my challenge, is you just got to be walking daily in his word. That's how you get to know him. But also these stories of Jesus, because in 2 Corinthians 4:6 it says that the light of the knowledge of the beauty of the Father, of God, is found in the face of Jesus. And that's why we're doing this. So we can rearrange the mental image, the structure, the framework we have of what the Father is like. That's why we're doing this all summer, is because of that. So, Mark chapter 5. I'm going to be reading starting in verse 21. Verse 21. Back to the story we were at last week. Verse 21. And by the way, as we do this, most of us know this story. We know what's coming, and it affects the way we read it. It's impossible to erase our memory on this, right? But as much as possible, let's look at it as if this is the first time, line by line, this is the first time we're encountering the story, all right? So starting in verse 21, when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. And if you remember, I said last week in Mark's Greek, it's clear that he is the ruling elder of the synagogue. He is the big kahuna. He is the most important man in this whole community. Most important man. And he's the head of the synagogue. And again, last week we talked about synagogue. I think to a lot of us, it's just like church. You just do that thing on Sunday, for them on Saturday, and that's it. But it was much more than that. That was their education center. It was where all the big decisions were made. It was the community center. Everything happened around the synagogue. It was their church, their school, their town square, their city hall. That's how important it was. And this man, Jairus, since that is the most important center of the town, him being the ruler is the most important person of that town. Alan Carr says that Jairus is a man of prominence, position, prestige, privilege, prosperity, and power in the community. For those of you that have a sense of the history of this town, think William Allen White, how important he was in this community. Running the school paper, running the town newspaper, Pulitzer Prize winner, and imagine if he were not just doing that, but if he were the pastor of the largest church in Emporia, he was the superintendent of schools, and he was the mayor of the city, all wrapped into one package. That's what this guy was like, okay? That's what this guy was like. He was the man. He was the man. And so this is the man who comes to Jesus for help. So verse 22 again. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus, that guy, he came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying." And if you remember, the Greek there he's saying, my little girl is at death's door. Unless you intervene, her death is imminent, Jesus. It's imminent. And I went there last week, and I'm going to go there again, because to me it's part of getting this story in my gut. So to everybody here who's a dad, especially dads of daughters, this is his little girl that's dying, right? The apple of his eye, the pride and joy of his life. And Luke tells us it's his only daughter, And last week I didn't tell you something else that's significant going on here. How old is she? She's 12 years old. How old in Jewish culture? At what age do you become an adult? When do you have your bar mitzvah and your bet mitzvah? When you are what? 13. She is 1 year in their culture from adulthood. He's about ready to be done with his parenting task to pass her off into society. This would be like a 17-year-old girl dying her senior year of high school the year before she goes off to college, okay? That's what this is like for him. That's what's going on. And he's desperate. Jesus was his only and his last hope, because Jesus was her only and her last hope. And I'm telling you, for him, this was a bona fide emergency. Not just for him, anybody, a bona fide emergency. Delay could be fatal. Okay? Delay could be fatal. So he asks at the end of verse 23, please come and put your hands on her so she'll be healed and live. So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. If you remember, the Greek word is like they were crushing him, because this is a must-see event. They want to see the healing of this, the daughter of this man. And then while they're on the way, it happens, the thing we talked about last week, the unexpected, the unplanned. For Jesus, what was the interruption? But for Jairus, what was the delay? The delay comes. Verse 25, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on her, but her story here is so significant. But if you remember, because she is in this perpetual state of bleeding, she's perpetually unclean, this woman is a pariah in her community, right? She is unimportant, she's insignificant, she's an untouchable. She cannot leave her home without making anybody or anything unclean, so she's probably a slave in her own home. A person like this can only leave in an emergency. She wouldn't even be able to spend time and hang out with her own family. Everybody avoided this woman like she was the plague. That's how she was treated. She was, again, enslaved in her home, cut off from her own people. And if you remember last week, I said on a scale of 1 to 10, where was Jairus on that scale? Jairus was a what? A 10. And this woman is she's a 0. She's a zilch, a nada, right? She's an untouchable. She's an outcast. She's a nobody. They lived in the same culture, the same community, but they lived in two totally different worlds. Okay? They lived within a mile of each other, but they are worlds apart. He's at the very center of that community. She's at the very edge and outside of that community. That's the difference between them. So verse 24 says, she had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors. She spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she only got worse. So she's not only unclean, but she's broke. And like Jairus, her situation is utterly hopeless, and she's desperate. And since today is really about unanswered prayer and delays, think about it. This woman, do you not know, has prayed every day for 12 years for God to heal her from this. 12 years of delay, 12 years of unanswered prayer. Verse 27, when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd, touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and he asked, who touched my clothes? You see, people are crowding against you, his disciple answered, and yet you ask, who touched my clothes? Hello, McFly. Anybody home? Okay, any Back to the Future fans here? That's what they're saying. McFly. Okay, verse 32. But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. And then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. And if you remember, in Mark's Greek, she told every detail of her story. Now, what about Jairus? Don't you know that while this is going on, he's looking at his watch, right? He's looking at his watch, and he's like, are you kidding me? Let's go, Jesus. Let's get this show on the road. My daughter is dying. Why are you delaying? Don't you know that for him, this was excruciating? Have you ever been there? Ever been in a situation where you need to get somewhere and you're waiting and it's excruciating? That's what's going on with him. But it's only going to get worse for Jairus. Rather than leave her and go, Jesus talks to her. Verse 34. He said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Be freed from your suffering. I talked a lot about that last week. There's a lot that's powerfully in those words of Jesus. Essentially, after she hears those words, he speaks deep into her soul, deep healing, and she leaves that day not a nobody but a somebody. And I'd say if you're here this morning, and if you weren't here last week, and you're like, I struggle feeling like I'm a little bit too small and insignificant for God, I challenge you, encourage you, go back and listen to that, because there's so much that's going on with that woman. So much that's going on. We learned last week that with Jesus, there are no little people. Now, I want to pause and look at this from Jairus' perspective. They're on the way to save his daughter's life, and Jesus stops. And he delays. Because of all things, someone touched him. Like, right? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me, Jesus? But it gets worse. First he says, somebody touched me, and he stops. It gets worse. That woman comes forward and reveals herself that she was the one. Can you imagine? He's like, what is she doing here? She's the reason for this delay for my daughter. It's her fault that this is happening. I'm sure he's like, Jesus, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? I'll tell you what he's thinking. Do you remember last week I asked the question? If you were there, who had the greater need? The chronically ill older woman or this little girl that was on her deathbed? Who had the greater need? The little girl. Pretty easy, right? Of course. This woman, she can wait. The whole community knows her story. She's been sick for 12 years. She's an older woman. She can come back tomorrow and get her healing from Jesus, right? But his daughter, she just has a few minutes to live. And Jairus would say, my daughter's the emergency, not this woman. If this older woman, this girl, were brought into an emergency room, who would the doctors take back first? The daughter, the little girl. To not do so would be malpractice. And I want you to know in Jairus' mind, that's exactly what Jesus is doing. He's committing malpractice. I mean, again, just imagine, get inside of his skin. It's like, come on, Jesus. Every second counts. My daughter's dying. And I'm sure to him, this delay was unreasonable. It was inexplicable. It was inexcusable. That's how I would have felt. Do you get Jairus? I mean, is that not how God's delays feel to you? When you want something, you're asking for something, you're praying for something, and it does not happen when you want it to do. It feels unreasonable, it is inexplicable, and it is inexcusable. How many times have I felt like, Jesus, you're late. What's up? You should have been here an hour ago at the time and the place that I wanted, and where are you? I know exactly how Jairus feels. Not to the degree, but I get the feeling. But suddenly then Jairus' worst nightmare happens. Disaster strikes. The results of the delay are catastrophic. Let's follow this in real time, okay? Pretend we don't know what happens. Verse 35, while Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead. Your daughter is dead. Why bother this teacher anymore? They come while he's still speaking and tell him, your daughter's died. Jesus' delay cost his daughter her life. It cost her her life. His worst fears are realized. Don't you know that his heart sinks, his shoulder slumped, his world totally crumbles. He is crushed internally, right? Totally. His last hope has been snuffed out like a candle. Life is gone, not just hers, but his. That's what's going on with him. And I'm sure he's like, why now of all times, of all people? Why her? And why did he do that with her? What in the world was he doing? But I love Jesus. Through it all, he remains calm. He remains the non-anxious presence in the raging storm. Verse 36. I really like this detail. Overhearing what they said. Remember, it says they came and told him that while he was speaking to the woman. So even while he's speaking to the woman, he's overhearing. His ear is attuned to that, and he's hearing what's going on. He's tuned into both of them. He said, don't be afraid, just believe. Luke adds these words, she'll be healed. He's like, stay with me, Jairus. This is far from over. Verse 37, he did not let anyone follow him. I mean, the Greek is really strong. He let absolutely no one follow him, it says, except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. This, by the way, is the first time Jesus singles out these three to go on a special journey with him. In verse 38, when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. The Greek word, remember I told you last week, this text has so many strong words. I mean, Matthew, Mark, and it's Peter's account. He really graphically is portraying what's going on here. Really strong word, commotion. It referred to a noisy tumult. It's an uproar, a large disturbance. We would say there was a huge ruckus that was going on, okay? And that Greek word wailing loudly was frequently used for the wailing of professional mourners. They would have hired in their culture women who were professional mourners to come and to wail loudly at the death of this girl. Very common in their culture. Matthew tells us there were also flute players there playing flutes, professional flute players. You know, funerals for us are quiet and solemn affairs, not in this culture. Even to this day, they are loud, and to us, they would be totally chaotic. But here's the point of this detail in the text. Jesus his delay was long enough, but that by the time he got there, the family and friends had already been told, professional mourning, funeral people had already come. And I'm going to tell you, we don't know. If this is Capernaum, Capernaum would have been the largest village in that area. I mean, a few of us in here have been there. Capernaum is not big, okay? That's how long the delay was, that all these people could gather at the word of her death. So verse 39, he went in and he said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but is asleep. And I don't have time to go into all that. He's speaking metaphorically about death. It's his way of saying death is not the end of a person, right? There is life beyond death. And then verse 40, as soon as he says that, she's asleep, they laughed at him. Suddenly, the whole attitude shifts from great mourning to great laughter at him. That word laughter, again, a very strong word in the Greek. It means to laugh scornfully. It's to ridicule, to taunt, to make fun of. They totally missed the point. They took him totally literally. That wasn't his point. They totally missed it. They're like, what a rube. And in so doing, they're betraying their lack of faith and trust in who he is and what he can do. In contrast to Jairus and this woman who both had put their faith in him. And as always, Jesus is the one who gets the last laugh. So the rest of verse 40. After that, he put them all out. Again, in Greek, really strong. Threw them all out. It's the exact same Greek word that's used in John 2:15, that when Jesus cleansed the temple, it says he threw out the money changers. That's the word that's used here. Matthew says that he told them, go away. Get out of here. Scramble. And then the rest of verse 40. He took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him. He went in where the child was. He took her by the hand. And speaking directly to the little girl, speaking directly to her, he says, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Talitha cum is Aramaic. It's the common language of Jesus and the Jewish people. You remember a few weeks ago we did the story of the deaf mute man? You remember that? And he said to that man, Ephphatha, that's also Aramaic. Mark has more of these Aramaic words than any of the gospel, and probably it's because Mark is recording Peter's account, and Peter so strongly remembers some of these words in Aramaic, he's never forgotten them. He's like, Mark, you get those in that account. That's how important they are. That's how much they stick in my mind. And then verse 42. Immediately, just like the woman healed immediately the girl stood and began to walk around as if absolutely nothing had happened. As if nothing had happened. And like all of his miracles, the effects, they're instantaneous, they're complete, they are undeniable. And just for emphasis, to make sure that we remember who this girl was, he tells us she was 12 years old. And then the rest of verse 42, at this they were completely astonished. In Greek, it literally reads, they were amazed with great amazement. The word great in Greek is mega. They were amazed with mega amazement. Absolutely astonished. One of those two Greek words literally means they were beside themselves. The New Living Translation translates it overwhelmed, totally amazed. The Berean Standard Bible, utterly astounded. I love the Amplified Bible. They were overcome with great wonder and utter amazement. And tell me, who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't be? And then verse 43. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this. Everybody is going to know, right? The whole village knew she was dying. They knew she had died. How do you explain that afternoon when she's out playing with the other kids, right? Everybody's going to know. And as a mom and dad, how do you not say anything about this, right? So, he says he told them to give her something to eat. And then Matthew concludes his account with these words, news of this spread through the whole region. Of course it did. Of course it did. Again, every time I'm in one of these encounters, I'm always struck. Is not Jesus good? Is he not true? Is he not beautiful? Are you not in awe of him? Because everywhere he goes, he brings life, love, life, and liberation. Everything he does, this is who Jesus is. Now, here's what I want to do with this story. I want to come back to it for a minute from the perspective of delays, because this for Jairus is a story of a delay. And from the inside of the story, from his perspective, I've already kind of hinted at this, talked about it. It was excruciating, it was unconscionable, and I know it was infuriating to him. Infuriating. If you hang around Jesus much, the untamed lion, you're going to experience delays. You know that? You hang around Jesus much, you're going to experience delays. You will find yourself feeling like Jairus. And in following Jesus, it doesn't take long to figure out that his sense of timing and my sense of timing are totally different. Have you not found that out? Totally different. There's a story of a man who once went to God and he said, hey, God, the word is that 1,000,000 years to you is just a second. Is that right? God said, that's totally true. And that $1,000,000 is just a penny to you. Is that right? And God said, totally true. And the man said, can I have a penny? And God said, give me a second. Okay, isn't that good? His sense of timing, totally different than mine. Here's the point. You can't hurry Jesus. You can't hurry him. His schedule is not my schedule. His agenda is not my agenda. His timetable is not my timetable. And as I've thought about delays in this story, I think one of the biggest struggles of spiritual life are the delays of God. I don't know if they are for me. It's one of the biggest struggles. You pray for something very crucial. You're asking for something you know you need. You're certain that God must act at a particular time or by a time, and nothing. Just deadening silence, right? Nothing. He delays. And here's what I've learned in my own heart, and I'm talking to a lot of people over the years. If you are not careful, God's delays will make you start doubting his power, his wisdom, and his goodness, or a combination of those. If you are not careful, doubts will start pushing you. Delays will start pushing you to doubting those things about God. And because of that, I want to step a little bit more outside of this story, okay? I want to step out. I want to step back. And in doing so, I'm going to show you that actually the exact opposite is true with God. The exact opposite. The things we doubt about him, that these things are in this story. 3 things I want to show you. And hopefully they will help us to learn in the midst of our delays to actually trust him even more. Trust him even more. And what I want you to see in this story, I want you to see Jesus' absolute power, his complete wisdom, and his utter goodness. He can heal a chronic physical problem just as easily as he can raise the dead. To him, there's no difference in those things, right? And we know this story so well. We know what's coming. We forget the shocking nature of this story because at that point in time, they had a story or two from the Old Testament, but they had lived hundreds and hundreds of years where dead people didn't come back from life. They did not have a category for what was going to happen that day. Do you know that? They'd heard a lot about Jesus' healings. They had not heard about him raising a dead person yet. They had no category for that. And it's amazing. He can so easily conquer the one thing on earth that none of us can conquer, death. So easily. He simply reaches down and he lifts up that little girl through death, the greatest power in the world, as if it were nothing. It's almost like if a dad's with a little girl and she falls down and he just reaches down and picks her up and says, "Upsy daisy," and picks her up. If I were making a movie of this, I was kind of thinking what it would look like when Jesus reaches his hand down in her hand. We would see like the spiritual realm. As he goes in, he's going into this spiritual realm, and ripples happen, and he reaches in and he grabs her soul. And he lifts her soul out, and he brings it back into her body. Is that not awesome power? Amazing power. But not just his power, but look at the complete wisdom of Jesus. Remember, everybody there, including everybody here, assumed that who was the greatest need? The girl. Everybody except Jesus. He was the only one who could see into the depth of everything, and he knew the greatest need was not the little girl. It was this woman, because he has infinite insight and infinite wisdom, and that's why he stopped. That's why he had her. That's why he made sure she came forward. That's why he spoke into her soul. That's why he did all of that, because he knew that this woman's spiritual need, because if you remember from the words last week, she encountered Jesus relationally, became his child through this encounter, right? He knew this woman's spiritual need was so great that he was willing to let the little girl die to have her need met. That's how great this need was, that he saw that nobody else did. He stopped everything he could to begin a relationship with her. And in his wisdom, he knew that Jairus would lose a daughter temporarily, but that through this he would gain a daughter eternally. Eternally. You know, then and now, we never know all the facts, do we? How often I don't see deeply into things. There's so much that I don't know. But he does. He sees the beginning from the end. His wisdom is so complete. And then finally, I want you to look at the utter goodness of Jesus. I mean, this story just oozes with his compassion and his goodness. That's why I love this story so much. I mean, the goodness of the restoration of two lives, but I see his goodness in two other particular ways. First, the way he treats people. Now tell me, who's at the top of the social order in that town? Jairus. Who's at the very bottom? The woman. That's the social order. And yet Jesus makes the powerful, privileged church leader wait while he tends to this powerless, poor, to them nothing of a woman. That's what he does. That's what he does. And in so doing, I want you to know, he flipped their social order totally on its head. And not just their social order, frankly, in our Western culture, our social order. Man, I love this. He is not enamored by power. He's not beholden to money. He is not mesmerized by celebrity. He's not enthralled to status. None of that. Jesus is so countercultural, and I absolutely love it. His is an upside-down kingdom. Is that not good? That's so good. How good is that? With Jesus, there are no little people. But not just how he treats people, the words he uses with people. Again, his words are tinged with deep love and affection for everyone in this story. Talked about that woman last week. I want to come back to her briefly. What does he call her? What's he call her? Daughter. And if you remember, the only woman he calls daughter in all of the Gospels. And I'm going to go there again for a minute, if you don't mind. But can you hear the loving intimacy in that word? Again, dads, you get this, right? There is nothing more touching than to speak these words to somebody, because your daughter is the apple of your eye, your pride and joy. These words are so deeply intimate that he speaks to her. She had been stigmatized for 12 years, dehumanized, she was called unclean, the untouchable, whatever. And he looks in her eye and he calls her daughter, because he can see deep into her soul, deeper than anybody else can see. And he knows she was created in the image of her Father, that she is deeply, passionately loved by him. She's somebody worthy of being treated with love and dignity. And so he says, daughter to that woman. And don't you know, she not only received that physical healing, but she received a soul healing she desperately needed. this love, unconditional love and acceptance that she needed on that day and in that moment. And then look how he speaks to the little girl. I love this. First, he takes her by the hand. Again, dads, what good dad does not love taking his daughter by the hand? Or a granddaughter. This morning, the girls wanted to go with me next door to get something before the service. And as we were leaving, they both reached out and grabbed my hand. We took them to Walmart the other day, and we were walking out the truck. I didn't know Pat was secretly behind me, took a photo, and the photo was me holding the girls by their hands. Okay? She said, their preferred escort. So if you're dad or granddad, you totally understand the beauty of this. And he says to her, Talitha cum. Cum in Aramaic is arise or get up. Talitha in Aramaic means little lamb. It was a common pet name for little girls in their culture. And the equivalent for us, it would perhaps be best translated honey or dear or sweetheart. So when he takes her by the hand, you know what he says to her? Sweetheart, it's time to get up. Something her dad had probably said to her hundreds of times in 12 years in the morning. Honey, it's time to get up. And that's what Jesus says to her. And she sits up and she comes out of death back into life. Man. Jesus, do you remember, he not only fathers the woman by calling her daughter, but he's fathering this little girl. His words to both this woman and this girl are so tender, they're so loving, so compassionate. Is not Jesus utterly good? Is he not utterly good? Utterly good. So, in this story of interruptions and delays, we see Jesus' absolute power, his complete wisdom, and his utter goodness. That's what we see in this story. And remember, Jesus said, I and the Father are what? And to see me is to see who? The Father. And that it's in the light of the knowledge of the beauty of God is seen in the face of Jesus. Let us remember that every week. So I want you to know, this is the Father. This is the Father. This is what he is like. He is absolutely powerful. He is completely wise. He is utterly good. The whole triune God is that way. I was having breakfast Friday with Ian Coleman Hull after their one-link team trip this summer to Southeast Asia. Kind of doing a follow-up debrief, hearing how things went. He told me a story of a fellow he met at a mall over there who was very interested in seeking spiritual things. And he said he asked the guy, he said, if you could imagine what a good God would look like, what do you think he would look like? What would he be like? And the guy said, 3 things come to mind. He would be all-powerful, he would be all-wise, and he would be altruistic. Or in other words, he would be good. This is Jesus. And this is the Father we worship. His deep longing for what a good God would be like is who our Father is. And again, if that's not your image of the Father, then the problem is not the Father, right? The problem is what? It's my gut image. It's my gut image. So, 12th, as I just kind of think and wrap this up, Jesus, he is not a tame lion. You know that. Delays will come. Be guaranteed of that. Delays will come. And when they do, the next time you have a delay, I want to challenge you to look to this story and to look to Jesus, because he is absolutely powerful, he is completely wise, and he is utterly good. And let that frame the delay for you. And if Jesus is absolutely powerful, completely wise, and utterly good, why in the world would you want to hurry somebody like that? Why in the world would you want to hurry somebody like that? And if this is the Father, if the Father loves me powerfully and wisely and compassionately, then why would I not place my absolute trust in him when I find myself in the middle of a delay? Why would I not do that? Worship team, come on out. I am certain there is somebody here this morning that right now Jesus is delaying something in your life. You are going through a Jairus kind of experience. He has not come through for you in the way or in the time that you've expected. You know, in the book of Ecclesiastes, my favorite book of the Bible, the author writes in chapter 3, verse 1, he says, there is a time for everything. At the end of verse 11 in that chapter, he says, yet none of us can fathom the beginning from the end. And then what I love what he says at the very beginning of verse 11. He says that he, God, has made everything beautiful in its time. He makes everything beautiful in his time. How many remember that song from like the 80s? Long, long ago, that Maranatha song. He makes everything beautiful in his time. God's timing is beautiful. I mean, think of Jairus. Jairus wanted a rescue, and Jesus gave him a resurrection. Can you imagine that? Whose timing would you have rather had if you were Jairus after the fact? You'd take the resurrection any day, wouldn't you? So, if you're struggling today with a God delay, I think Jesus would say to you, I have power you cannot imagine. I have infinite wisdom. Time to lay it down. And so we're going to sing that worship song and a time of laying it down and of surrender. And if that's you, I pray that you would do that at this time, that you would give it to him. If it would be helpful, we haven't had an invitation up front, but if it would be helpful for you to come and kneel up here and to just kind of lay that here and say, I lay that down, I give that to you, and pray and surrender that here and leave it here, then feel free to do that. So, all right. Let's worship him.
Here is where I lay it down, every burden, every crown. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down, every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to, and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Here is where I lay it down, every burden, every crown. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down, every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to, and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. Shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better, and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to, and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to, and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to, and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Here is where I lay it down. You are all I'm chasing now. This is my surrender. You are beautiful. You are beautiful. You're my delight, my portion forever. You are my joy, my greatest treasure. You are beautiful. You are beautiful. You're my delight, my portion forever. You are my joy, my greatest treasure.
Pray with me. Father, we come to you and we give thanks for who you are. Lord, there are times from our perspective that your decisions and timing can be pretty exacerbating for us and pretty infuriating, and I thank you that you know we're but dust. Lord, would you help us to reframe how we think about you and to be reminded that you're absolutely powerful, you are completely wise, and you are utterly good. Lord, help us to trust you with the things in our lives that do not go as we want them to go, to trust you with our delays, to trust you with our unanswered prayers, to know that you're not in a hurry because you love us, because you love us. So just help us to not be afraid and to only believe. And we pray in the name of Jesus, and God's people said, amen. All right, 12th, you are sent.